Now, as I mentioned, though, we've seen some challenges in adoption, and we want to talk a little bit about those and some of the things that we're working on in order to make this easier for all of you. And so for that, I would like to invite Karen Fidelic, our Director of PM for Lightning Platform, to come on stage and tell us what we're doing.
Great. So thanks, Wade. So as Wade's just reviewed, with Salesforce DX, we've worked really hard to build tools and methodologies to make your development experience better. But ultimately, that development experience is only as good as the level of support that we have for metadata in our platform. As you may know, metadata is what allows you to build customized applications on our platform. And key to a good developer experience is automation. Being able to automate your flows, your development, and your ALM flows from source control through continuous integration and delivery, all the way through the whole release management process. And the bridge between the metadata in your applications and these automated flows is what we're calling our metadata exposure channels. And these are the tools and applications and APIs that allow you to move metadata between environments in an automated way. And so these tools are things like our metadata API and source tracking in Salesforce DX, where you can do source push and pull, packaging, like Wade just mentioned, change sets. These are the ways that you can automate your flows and move metadata across different environments. And when we have cases where metadata is not supported in any of these channels, we have gaps, and that breaks the automation. So unfortunately, I would imagine that some of you, maybe many of you in this audience, have encountered these kinds of gaps that we have and have had to manually intervene with your development and make manual modifications directly in your org because you weren't able to automate that through our flows. And given that automation is key, we understand that this is not acceptable, and we're placing a high priority on making sure that we've got all those gaps covered and filled, and that we have full support for metadata across all of our system. And so with that, we're placing a high priority on an initiative to make sure that we've got this full coverage. So the first step of doing that is to ensure that we have proper documentation and that we understand what our coverage actually is and can properly communicate that. And so the first thing we're going to do is talk about documentation and look at our current documentation that we have. So with that, we're going to switch over here, do a quick little exploration of our metadata documentation. So some of you have probably seen this. We'll start with our metadata API guide that we have. This is where we list all of our metadata that's supported in our metadata API. We also have pages that list the metadata that's supported through our other channels, like packaging and source tracking and our tooling API, and we have multiple pages that go through that level of support. We also even have a page that lists unsupported metadata in our system. And the point of this is really just to illustrate that today, our documentation for metadata is pretty disparate. It's not consistent. It's not necessarily easy to find or navigate. And furthermore, on our side, it's hard to keep accurate and updated because it's a manual process for us to maintain this information. And so with that, we recognize that we want to make this whole process better and deliver you better information. And so I'm pleased to announce today and share with you a new metadata coverage report, which we've been working on and which we'll be releasing in the summer 18 release. And so what you're seeing here is a new report. And what you might first note is that we've got a list of all the metadata that we support, all of our metadata types down the left-hand side. Across the top, we've got columns for each of our metadata channels. We've been focusing on the core Salesforce DX channels, the metadata API, source tracking, source push and pull, and unlocked packaging. We will be adding additional channels to this list in a subsequent release. But the first thing you can note right off the bat is that now we've got a consolidated view of all this information in one place. So this is a definite improvement over what we've got today, where we've got this kind of, as we just saw, scattered. The second thing that you'll note is that we've got these pretty green check marks indicating where we have metadata supported in a given channel. We have a dash that indicates where we don't yet have support for a given metadata type in a channel. And that's useful information, but what's really exciting and really the most important part of this report right now is how we're getting that information and what's happening underneath the hood. So this report is being automatically generated in real time. When we open this, it's actually pulling the data directly from our platform. And so that's really exciting. That's really important because it means that you can be assured that the information that you're seeing is accurate and reflective of the environment that you're working in. So we think this is a huge step forward for us. That said, information is great, but what our real goal is to make sure that we have complete coverage. So going back to the whole idea of automation, we want to be able to automate your entire development process. And so our goal is, in fact, to make sure that we have green check marks across this whole table here. And one of the features that we're looking to add to this report is to allow you to select any of these gaps that you can see and essentially vote them up and help communicate back to us what the most important gaps are for you. And that will help us in our prioritization process as we work through closing these gaps. So we are placing a high priority on closing the gaps and also ensuring that moving forward, all new metadata that we develop internally is supported through all of these channels just out of the gate. So with that, full coverage for metadata is important, but we also recognize that it's not necessarily enough. And so one of the things that we continually hear as a challenge as you're getting going with Salesforce DX is an understanding and figuring out how to break up your org into more manageable pieces in order to take advantage of the modularity and packaging capabilities that DX offers. And so with that, I'm pleased to announce and share with you today our new dependency API that we're introducing as a pilot in summer 18. And what this API is going to allow you to do is run simple queries that will return the metadata relationships within your org or your application. And so this will allow you to really explore the relationships and get a better understanding. Yay! So let's take a look at what just ran here. We've got Dave running a demo back here, and what we did was we just ran a query. It's a simple SOQL query, and we're querying against a new object that we've created called a metadata component dependency object. And this is a lot of information that's being spit out here, but let's take a look at what we've actually got. So if we can scroll back up to the top, and we can see what we're actually looking at. So we've got the first column here is all of the metadata components that are in our org. We're running this against the Dreamhouse app. Okay, so we've got all the components in that Dreamhouse app. We've got a list then of what the types of those components are. And then we've got a list of all the referenced components, the components that are referenced by that first column. So if we just take a moment and sort of reflect on this, this is an incredible amount of information that we have not historically had easy access to. And this is really the key information that's going to help us understand the structure of the org, slice and dice it, and get that understanding that we haven't had. You can almost think about this as the keys to the black box that has been our metadata and the metadata dependencies. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do a little bit of exploration and look at a few use cases of how we might be able to use this data to be able to better answer the questions and challenges that we've had, okay, as you've been working through this adoption process. So we're going to start with this property controller Apex class. We're just going to take one of these components here. And we're going to run another query. And with this time, we're going to run the same query, but we're going to filter on the property controller component here. Okay, and when we do this, what you'll see is now we've got a list of the property controller component and all of the referenced components, the components that are referenced by that property controller Apex class. So you can start to get an idea the power of this, right? So now I've got sort of a set of metadata that I could encapsulate and I could package up and install into an org through an unlocked package, let's say. And I could continue on, and you could imagine how you could do queries like this to really understand the structure across your whole org. So now let's take a look at another use case that we might want to take advantage of here. So you can see that this property controller component references a bunch of custom fields. And let's say that you've made a modification to one of your custom fields. We're going to pick broker here as a custom field that we're going to look at. And you've made this change in your org, and you're wondering what the impact of that change is across your whole application or your whole org. So in other words, the question that you're trying to answer is, what are all the components that reference this broker custom field? And it just so happens that this is one of the most popular questions that we have on Idea Exchange right now. There's something like 34,000 votes on this particular question. And what we can do now with this API is we can answer that question. So we're going to run this query again. And this time we're going to filter, we're kind of going to flip the query. We're going to filter it on the referenced component, in this case being that custom field broker. And when we do that, we can now see a list of all of the components that reference broker, that custom field. Okay? Woo! So again, you can really kind of understand and get a sense of the power of this data and what you can do with it and how you can slice and dice and get a better understanding. That said, you may be looking at this information and saying, well, this is all well and good. This is really great information, but it's a lot of words and it's a bunch of lists. And what I'd really like is to be able to visualize this, maybe graphically. And so we're in luck. It just so happens that Andy Fawcett has created a plugin that lets us do just that. And so we've got this plugin that we're going to run here. And what it's doing is it's outputting a dot file, which is a text-based representation of the structure of our metadata here that can be then read in to a graphical visualization tool. So we're going to generate that dot file for that broker custom field, that node of the hierarchy. We're going to look at this in VS Code, and you can see, again, it's just a simple text-based file that illustrates through words the hierarchy of that node. But what's more interesting is now we can open that in a graphical visualization tool, GraphViz in this case, and see a really nice picture of that hierarchy, right? And so you can see here that broker custom field is being referenced by all of the components that are listed there as illustrated through the arrows. Woo. Thank you, Andy. So with that, in summary, I hope that I've teased you a little bit and given you some ideas, gotten you excited, and maybe encouraged about some of the tools and capabilities that we're now introducing that should help you move forward with that whole process of adoption on DX. And with that, I'd like to hand it back to Wade.
Great. Thank you, Karen. So just a quick summary, that metadata report is fantastic. I think all of us as developers know how vital good documentation is, and we have a lot of it. The difference here being that this is dynamically generated data based on your org. So very excited to see this metadata report come to life and for you to be able to use it. And that dependency API, I think we really illustrated some neat use cases, but I think what excites us most is what you will all do with this dependency API. The fact that you'll be able to explore the metadata in these relationships, it'll just be exciting to see the tools and capabilities that you empower and drive with that.